Welcome back to 2-3. We've been through the intro section. We're ready to get going now. We're going to jump into the Bible, see how the great adventure begins, and what our place is in it. So as we get into our chart, as we get into our color, we're going to start in the early world. That's the view of the world, the planet, Earth, viewed from space, viewed from God. And we're going to be going through Genesis chapters 1 through 11. That's really the first part of our chronological books. Remember, we're going to have 14 chronological books that are going to give us the big story, the narrative story of Scripture. And obviously that story is going to begin in the beginning. Okay, so Genesis, as we said in the intro section, actually Genesis comes from the Hebrew word bereshith, which means in the beginning. Okay, so this is pretty much the beginning of the story. Now, before we get into Genesis, there's obviously a lot of things we have to go over because we live in the 21st century and people are going to have certain questions. Did this really happen? Did it really happen in 6 days? Was it 6 24-hour periods? What's going on with Adam and Eve? And where are the dinosaurs? You know, and there's all these kinds of questions that come to people's minds. And, and honestly, we don't have time to get into all those questions today. What we have to understand is a few things. For instance, that Genesis, our church has taught us that we don't have to read the first few chapters of Genesis as literal historical scientific fact. Again, remember, in the story, it's not always about the how, it's more about the why. Okay? That the Hebrew writers, way back when in antiquity, they were employing different kind of literary functions when they put together Genesis. And they weren't trying to put together this literal, scientific, fundamentalist that happened in 6 days, and there were 24-hour periods. There are schools of thought, there are scholars that say that's how it happened. There are schools of thought and scholars that say that's not how it happened. You know, and that's sort of where we're coming out of today. Our church has said you do not have to believe it happened exactly according to these details, but there are things that we do believe, and we are supposed to believe, and that is that we do come from original parents, that there is original sin, okay, that sin did enter, and that the choice was made, the fall, and that we were promised a Redeemer. Okay, we were promised a Redeemer. And so there are certain facts that come out of it. So we can't fall into the trap of saying, well, Genesis is just fiction. It's just fiction. No, we can't. It's more of an allegory. Okay? An allegory is a literary device used to communicate truth through symbolism. Okay? So there are truths. This is still truth. Okay? But it's not necessarily scientific truth. When it says 6 days, it does not mean there were 6 24-hour periods. That, you know, a day, okay, in the Hebrew way of writing is more a span of time, not like a specific hour, you know, like, 60 minutes equals 1 hour, versus if you go to a restaurant and they're like appetizers are for happy hour, and that goes like 6 hours, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. Like there's not specific units of time. So when we get into creation, we're not going to digress, we're not going to get into all those other questions, about, evolution, because we're not going to get into, how man and apes and species and all that kind of stuff, because that's really not where we're going today. If you want to know, why aren't dinosaurs in the Bible? It's really obvious. God hates Barney, too. Everybody does. I'm just kidding. Barney's cool. No big deal with the big purple bro. Anyways, we get into this. I want you to keep in mind, again, we're looking for the why, not for the how. Okay, so as we get into Genesis, we're going to focus in on those truths of the church. There was an original couple. Okay, God is the creator of all. Sometimes in the modern era, we want to say, God didn't really create. It was a molecule and a molecule. And we say, okay, well, where'd the molecules come from? Someone will say, well, I don't know. I do. Well, but it was a molecule that hit a molecule, and then a big explosion and goo. And no. Who moved the molecules? Well, I don't know. I do. We can look at these moments and say, okay, think about this. We have a God. Okay, we have a God who put our planet, right, on a 23 and a half degree axis. Okay, 1 degree more, 1 degree less. We're not here. Polar flood. 1 degree. We have a God. Okay, we have the sun. Center of our solar system. Pretty big deal to us. Pretty important for us. We don't spin off into orbit. There's a gravitational pull. Our planet's moving at like 1,000 miles an hour. We're not spinning off into orbit. That's a divine design. That's a God who pays attention to detail. You can walk outside and you can take like a dime in your hand and you can hold it away from your face. If you hold it up in the night sky, that dime is going to cover about 15 million stars. 15 million out of the billions of stars in our galaxy. And our sun is one of them. That's a divine design. But it's a design that happens over a long period of time. Our God is a God who pays attention to details. And you're going to see that as we move through here today. So as we get into the story, as you enter into the story with me, keep those things in mind. Keep in mind what God is trying to say to us, what he's trying to communicate to us through Genesis. We pick it up in the early world. It's that turquoise color on your bookmark, and if you're rolling the beads and on your timeline. And we begin, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. Don't you wish people read like that at Mass? It would be so much more fun. What if they did voices? Now that would really be cool. But then you end up at Mass and it's Pentecost and you're going, oh man, they're not going to get one of these names right. You're just kind of praying for them. Now we get into Genesis, and what do we have right at the beginning? Boom, we have creation. The way we say is that God created everything, that ultimately our creation isn't God. God is the uncreated creator. We say, why did he create? Because he is love. Because he is love. It says in 1 John, we love because he loved us. So why did he create? Because if you are love, you want to have an object of love. Okay? And the Trinity is perfect love. It's the love of the Father for the Son, the love of the Son for the Father, and that love is so real and so tangible, it's its own person in the Holy Spirit. That's what John Paul II told us when he was here. The Trinity is perfect love. And God is love. And God says it. He says the word, and here you go. And the cosmos, here it comes. What you're going to find in the creation accounts, in Genesis 1, Genesis 2, there's 2 accounts of creation. As you get into creation, notice the order. Okay, pay really close attention. So as you're looking at your timeline, looking at your workbooks, in creation is Genesis 1 and 2. Notice the order of the way God creates things. He's going to create the light from the dark, and that's going to give us time. Okay, so now we can measure time. The timeless one is now giving us time. Okay, from there he's going to create the water, and he's going to create the land. And we're going to have so basically what he has right now is he's creating separation. It was just a void. It was nothing. People say, what was God doing before creation? We say nothing. He had no time. Right? And now we have time. That was a joke. So now we move forward. That's a stupid joke. It's okay. So we move forward and we say, okay, this is what's going on. He creates the light, right? Gives us time. He creates the water and the land. And we have separation in the first 3 steps of creation. And after separation, we're going to move into decoration. He's going to give us the birds. He's going to give it first the sun and the moon, then the birds and the fish, and then the beasts and man. Now think about that. We move into the 6th day. Okay, he's given the sun, the moon, and the stars their own day on day 4. He's given the birds and the fish their own day on day 5. And day 6, he lumps man in with beasts. That's not cool. We're going, come on, don't we get our own day, God? And some of the girls are going, I've smelled, boys. That makes sense. Guys, if a girl ever looks at you and says, you're so manly, that says, go take a shower. That's what that means, okay? So as we move into day 6, we have man and beast. And what's interesting as we move along is that every stage of creation, now pay attention to this, every stage of creation gets more complex. You go from light, to water, to land, to sun, moon, and stars, to birds and fish, to animals, to man. So at every stage it's getting more and more and more complex until he gets to man. Now while man was created on the 6th day, man was not created for the 6th day. Man was created for the 7th day, the Sabbath day, the day that God rested. And we go, makes sense God would rest. He had to be tired. He had a lot of stuff going on. We say, no, it's not like that. It wasn't like, after 6 days, God went back in his lazy God recliner and just went, I did good, I need a nap. Because God is God. He doesn't get tired. So this should tell us something when it says God rested. And what he's basically saying to us is that the 7th day, I'm going to set apart. The 7th day is going to be a sign. The 7th day is going to be about the Sabbath. It's going to be about rest. It's going to be about the covenant. But before we get to the 7th day, on the 6th day, he gives Adam, man, dominion over all the animals. He gives him dominion. He can name them. And there's one Christian comedian who says, that's a pretty hard thing to do. You're Adam. He says, okay, you're going to name all the Adam. You're going to name all the animals. So Adam walks in and he's going, okay, you'll be hippopotamus, a really beautiful, long name. About 10 hours later, he's running out of names. He's just going, you're cow, okay? And you're fly, and he's just running out of names, right? And it's kind of funny if you think about that, but really what we see in Adam is he sees all these beasts coming around, and he says, you know what, where's my mate? There's no one suitable for me. And we see the separation that it's not right. I'm not equal to a beast. Man has an intellect. You have the ability to logic, okay? You have free will, the ability to work on that logic. And you use cutlery. We're very different than animals. Okay, so as you move forward, and you have to look at it and go, okay, I'm different than a beast. I am. And it's interesting, God says everything is good as he's creating it. He created the heavens, and it was good. Created the earth, and it was good. Created man, and he was alone, and it was not good. And we hear the first time God says it's not good. So God casts Adam to sleep. And while he's asleep, he takes a rib from his side. It's interesting that it's his rib. Some people suggest that was because if they took a bone from his foot, that would suggest that he had dominion over Eve. If they took it from his head, that would suggest that she has dominion over him. But from his side, there's an equality there. Now listen to the words in Genesis. And this is really, really important. This comes from Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image. You hear that us language? Now while this is speaking about, other Hebrew forms of literature in the heavenly community, that's foreshadowing. This is the Trinity. This is our God. Even though Jesus hasn't stepped foot on earth yet, Jesus is very alive in the Trinity. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Does that mean that God looks like us? No. Our image means let us make man in the capacity to love. The image of God is the capacity to love. Okay? Let us make man in such a way that he can love. Okay? And he has free will. Let us make man after our likeness in our image. Let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, the earth, every creeping thing. Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Notice that he made us different. You're like, yeah, no kidding. Way to go, Einstein. Yeah, I know. But think about that for a second. He made us different. There's a lot of times in our modern culture when we don't like that difference. You can look at certain magazines, listen to certain songs, watch certain shows, see certain people. And what we see is a lot of people nowadays are trying to diffuse that line, that gender line. They're trying to diffuse the line of difference. Because a lot of people are afraid that different means unequal. Different doesn't mean unequal. God even says, he says, I made him in the divine image, male and female. He says different is good. And speaking as a guy, when I look at my wife, different is great. Mm-hmm. You have to look at those moments and say, why do we try and blur that line as a society? Some people feel threatened. Some people, you have women that are trying to be more like men that are trying to be more like women. We're trying to say, no, we have to blur the line. We're all the same. And that's what means equal. And God says, no, we're very, very different. Equal, but very different because our roles are different. He says to Adam, okay, and you can read about this in Genesis 2. He says, I'm putting you here to till and to protect. Okay? Basically, he says to till and to keep. But the word in Hebrew, shamar, means to guard. I'm putting you here to protect, to guard the garden. You're here to work it, but you're here to protect it. Okay? You're here to protect it. And that doesn't just mean, okay, I'm going to stand at the entrance, and no one's allowed in. That means you're protecting everything in the garden, including your wife. That's why when he says to Adam, it's not good that you're alone, and he makes Eve, he makes them out of his rib. But notice how every stage of creation got more complex as we went along. Did you notice that? Including Eve. Because the only being more complex than man is woman. That's a reality. Okay? And that's not meant to sound, I'm not making light of that. I'm saying that very, 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 with a lot of respect for women, a lot of dignity. I mean, the dignity of women. The reality is, physiologically, biologically, women are more complex than men, right? I mean, women, God separates women. He singles them out and says, you are going to participate uniquely in the act of creation. And while it takes a man and a woman and God to make a baby, you're going to participate in an even different way. You're going to actually act in the very process of creation with me, reproductively. Now think about this, and I don't want to get too deep into biology and physiology. Guys, have you ever been sitting maybe with a girlfriend or someone you really like, and you're watching a movie or something, maybe you're holding hands, and you notice that her hands are just ice cold? I mean, just ice cold. You're sitting there and you're saying, how is this possible? It is 150 degrees. We're on the beach, and your hands are a freezer. You're going, how is this possible? And and you talk to different doctors and different physiologists and things, and a lot of people say it's because the heat from their extremities is going to protect their core. It's going to protect their reproductive system. Like, that's just the way that women are built. That's divine design. That is divine design. Men and women are different, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And if every layer of creation is more complex, that should show us, as he gives Adam his role, the role is to protect, what is he protecting? One of the things he's supposed to do is he's supposed to protect Eve. Does that mean Eve is weak? No. It doesn't mean women are weak. It means women are strong. But he starts to set up the gender difference. The man is to give, and the woman is to receive. That makes pretty easy sense, right? If you just think about the biology of it, when you think about sexuality, you think about a married couple, the man is giver, the woman is receiver, husband and wife, right? If you think about the biology. And as you move forward, God makes it really clear right from the beginning. And I feel like we need to make it clear, really, really clear right from the beginning. Men and women are different, and that's a wonderful thing. We are a mystery, and we're a mystery not to be solved. We're a mystery to be beheld. Why would God do it that way? Why would God do it that way, that he's going to come into our existence and participate in the very act of creation with us like this? Because he is love. And he's going to take that symbol of love and that sign of love in marriage, man and woman. Now, make no mistake, there's a lot of debate on it now. What's marriage? It's a contract. It's this, it's that. Marriage is more than two names on a bank account. And marriage is more than two names on an insurance statement. And marriage is more than a white picket fence, a Volvo, a suburban cul-de-sac home, and a dog named Rex. Okay? Marriage is more. In fact, we call it holy matrimony as a sacrament. Do you know what matrimony means? It means the way of making a mother. It comes from the word mater, the way of making a mother. That's what God teaches us from the very beginning. And sometimes in our modern society, we've started to believe that, you know what, that a man and woman make a baby. Just a man and woman, they can make a baby. Or even yet, some of the modern Dr. Frankenstein types can say, oh, we don't even need a man and a woman. We're just going to take this and this test tube and put it to this level. And da, da, da. No, it's a man, a woman, and God. And the minute I try, anybody tries to separate God from the creative that's going on with man and woman, we lose what's most important about sex, and that is its spirit of self-sacrifice. That it's not about what you're doing for me, it's about what I'm giving to you. And that's why it's not enough to say, well, I'm in love, that's why I'm having sex. It's not enough. Because sex is a language. It's a forever language. And if we are not bound in a forever covenant with the man, with the woman, with God, if we're not bound in that covenant, then that forever language is being used in a for now way. A way that God never intended. So what God says is, I'm going to set this day apart. You two are married, and you're going to have the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, this is the sign of my covenant with you. One holy couple and their God. And what God says in the covenant is, I'm going to give you all of myself. I'm going to hold nothing back. I'm giving you everything. I'm going to love you without limit. I'm going to give you everything that I am. And my request, your part of the covenant is you're going to give me everything that you are. Everything. Now, that's a hard thing for us to wrap our heads around a lot of the time. See, because when we hear, covenant, we think of contracts, We think of a contract. That's why our divorce rate is so high, and that's why a lot of people, end up getting married. They probably shouldn't even get married. They're not really called into the covenant. And a contract is, okay, we're going to try this for a while. If I hate mowing my lawn, I hate it. It's my least favorite thing to do. So if I pay, $10 to the kid next door and he comes and mows my lawn, that's a contract, exchange of goods and services. I pay you $10, you go sweat in the sun while I watch ESPN. It makes sense, right? That's a contract. It's fair. He knows what he's getting into. I know what I'm not getting into. It's beautiful. A covenant is different than a contract, because a covenant is a sworn oath. It's saying, I will give you all that I am. And God gives us all that he is. And then God, and every time he gives a covenant, he gives you a sign for that covenant. It's a sworn oath. Okay? And the Latin word for sworn oath is sacramentum. Kind of sounds like another word. We love big words as Catholics. Sacrament. Sworn oath. It's a covenant, a renewing of the covenant. What we're going to see now in Genesis is as he comes in, he gives them a covenant. And the sign of the covenant is Sabbath. And that is that no matter how busy you get in that 168-hour week, okay, this is what God's saying to you, no matter how busy you get, you're going to slow down. Okay? You're going to slow down. You're going to downshift. You're going to pull up the brake if you have to, and you're just going to let me love you. And you're going to love me back. You're not going to do anything. You're just going to let me love you. Okay? That's the way it works. So as we move forward, we go, okay, that's all he wants to do. He just wants to love his children. He wants to have a plan. A covenant is just a plan to love and to make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody's around the same dinner table with God. And as he moves forward, the plan's